Hi guys, welcome back. We're going to take care of part two today. Did have a chance yesterday and last night. I went through your exit tickets and read your responses. Everybody did pretty well. There were a few mistakes here and there, but they were kind of tricky, so uh, no big deal. But I did notice one aspect that I want to make sure we clear up today, and that was the whole, uh, as we said, the abiotic factors. And in the last question, if you remember yesterday, I had asked you to describe kind of the relationship between biotic and abiotic. Abiotic, excuse me. A lot of people had trouble with that. So what I want to do today is just to revisit our question. We'll go back really quickly. This is going to be a short video and go over the cards again, a few of them. And then I'm going to see if we can piece all of that together with another exit ticket today that's a little more related to you and your personal life. Just remember that yesterday our focus was we had cards. Don't forget these different organism cards here. And I had asked you really simply after watching the video to try to sort them in which cards you thought were individuals, which cards were showing populations, communities, ecosystems. And remember, some of them were showing abiotic factors. So, like for example, I had given a lot of you the freebie here of a rabbit. There's one rabbit there. That's an individual. But if you look up over here, for example, chickadees, these kinds of birds, they're all over the place here in Westerly, especially over one of our wintering residents. There's one, two, three of them there. So that's not an individual. That's a population of chickadees. Um, so people did pretty well there, but it does get a little tricky when we get down into this the pond area. I can see a bunch of living things. Um, as well as there's also some non-living stuff there. So that's not an individual, that's not a population, that's not even a community, that's an ecosystem because it's a mixture of living and non-living things. Along with the fact like clouds and rain, those can't be biotic, they're not alive. So those are abiotic factors, but they're just as important. So just to go back and touch on again, we got to be really careful. I did see some confusion with biotic versus abiotic factors. Remember, biotic, bio means living. That's things like rabbits, chickadees, etc. Abiotic, that prefix a, like we said, means non-living. So just to really, again, another different kind of example, obviously a picture of a tree. If we focus just on the tree here, this picture is a little misleading. If we focus on just the tree is obviously is biotic. It's living. And if we look at this picture as a whole here, the grass here is living. The sky and sunshine and clouds, the dirt is not living. But we got to even be careful. There's some stuff that's down in the dirt, like fungus and bacteria that are alive. So if we keep it simple here, we focus just on a tree. That's biotic. And then obviously, ugly little mangy uh, squirrel, or I have a buddy who refers to them as tree rats. They're no different than rats with tails, kind of gross. That's biotic too. But one big aspect that we kind of left out of the picture yesterday was the idea of interactions. We want to focus on that today. That if you think about it, do these two biotic factors, do they interact somehow? When we say interact, do they do things that will affect one another? So you might say to yourself, well, obviously they do, because if you think of it, squirrels love to eat. There's an oak tree here. You love to eat acorns. So this tree, when it's trying to reproduce, is leaving acorns on the ground. The squirrel is interacting by taking its acorns and spreading them around and eating them. So the tree provides food for the squirrel. The tree also provides shelter, a place to hide and a place to live for the squirrel. In turn, the squirrel actually relies on the tree for those things, and it gets food for the tree. And if you think about it, it's kind of hidden, kind of strange, but obviously the tree is benefiting and helping the squirrel quite a bit. But does the squirrel help the tree? If you stop and think about it, it does. Can you think of a way? We actually already mentioned it, the fact that it doesn't mean to do this, but by dropping acorns and seeds on the ground, it's providing food for the squirrel. So biotic organisms, living things, they can interact with each other. They can affect each other, and they can be in good ways or in bad ways. We'll talk about that later on in the course, later on this year. And then what about if we throw this guy in? The sun. The sun isn't alive, so it's not biotic, it's abiotic. But does the sun interact with either one of those organisms? Does the sun interact with the tree or with the squirrel? Now, this non living thing does interact with the tree. Without sunlight, the tree can't make its own food, it can't do photosynthesis. So the tree does definitely interact with the sun. Not enough sunlight, not enough photosynthesis, not enough food. So we really just want to get the practice of now that you have practiced identifying biotic factors, we want to start to take a step back and try to piece them together here. Because if we think of some basic questions there, we want to be able to, if you're given examples like we just did, what's biotic, what's abiotic, and being able to identify in factors in pictures if they're abiotic. So I want to go ahead and show you, it's kind of a cheesy cartoon version. Actually, it's a super cheesy version. But if you look at this forest, little different from a forest around here. We've got some critters in there that don't quite live here. Like we don't have wolves, we don't have moose, but further north in New England, we could have these things into Canada. So if you look, I think it's probably pretty easy for you to get the biotic stuff in here. The bear, the bird, the flowers, the trees, the grass, those are easy. But if you look at it closely, there are abiotic factors in here, like the water, that's abiotic. The rocks are abiotic. The dirt, even some of the stuff you can't directly see, like what's floating around in this picture, that's too small to see. Think of the air, oxygen, carbon dioxide. Those aren't alive, but they definitely are important to organisms in this picture. So it really just takes a little bit of practice looking at them. Biotic is usually easier, abiotic is a little more hidden. But again, the fact that not only identifying them, but how do they interact? Like that bear can interact with that rabbit, it can kill it and eat it. Obviously, the bear's getting food. It's not good for the rabbit, but it does affect it. Living and non living things interact, they affect one another. So that's our big thing that we want to try and practice there. So really quickly before I let you go, I want you to go back to that picture and think, is that an example of a community or is it an ecosystem? I'm going to go back to that and give you a second to take a look at it. You can pause the video if you want to. I would go ahead and pause it and take a look. And is that a community or an ecosystem? Go ahead and pause it and take a second. All right. Well, hopefully you've made your guess, at least to yourself. Maybe you're talking to yourself out loud. But if we focused just on the living things here, that would be a community. Just the trees, the flowers, all the animals. But we got to remember too, there are non-living things here: the water, the sunlight, the rocks, the dirt, the oxygen in the air, the carbon dioxide in the air. So this actually would be an example of an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem. So I want to leave you with just kind of an open-ended question, something to hang on to and think about. How big or how small can an ecosystem be? Does it have to be a big, giant, huge forest or a big, giant ocean? Or can an ecosystem be a lot smaller? Could an ecosystem be the size of an area of an environment that's something like the size of your hand? Could that qualify as an ecosystem, meeting our definitions? All right. So what I'm going to ask that we do here is we're going to go back and I'm going to ask that there is an exit ticket that I want you guys to think about. To ponder, it's going to ask you really, really simply. There's an exit ticket where it's going to ask you to go into, before I stop our video here, going to ask you to go in and to really simply plop yourself into Westerly and come up with some examples in and around Westerly. A couple examples of each of those levels. I want you to think of some abiotic factors and what role they play. Why are they important? And then you're going to end by trying to pick three of those organisms and make some interconnections. How do they directly or indirectly interact with you? This last part might be a little tricky, but I want you to try your best. All right. So now at this point, you may go ahead and complete that exit ticket. See you guys tomorrow.